The COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine have shown even more clearly how crucial the role of logistic infrastructure, including railways and seaport, is from both a civilian and military point of view. Also, the declaration of Finland's accession to NATO increased its importance as a partner country for Poland and the Baltic states. Today, my guests are Kustaa Valtonen, entrepreneur and angel investor, founding partner at Finest Area Development. Peter Vesterbacka, founder of Finest Bay Area and Slush, known also as the Mighty Eagle at Angry Birds, for many years taking that brand to unprecedented heights. And Frank Schuhholz, founder and FMS Advisers, leading expert in multimodal and intermodal-based supply chains across Europe. We will talk about the importance of the modern and high-tech infrastructure in the CEE region and beyond. Looking forward for this discussion because I think it's really not the usual situation to have so many different perspectives. So not only usual East and West. So Frank is based in the Netherlands with this German angle, but also South and North with your coming from Finland. So before we start our proper discussion, can I ask you to briefly introduce yourself and the project that you're actually bringing to the discussion?
All right, so my name is Kustaa Valtonen and I'm from the Finest Bay Area Development Company, Finnish company preparing to construct the world's longest undersea railway tunnel connecting Helsinki and Tallinn metropolitan areas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm Peter, also working on the tunnel project, but that's kind of like a small part of kind of like what Finest Bay Area development and like what that is all about. So we are the most successful region as far as startups are concerned. So we have the highest number of startups per capita, highest number of unicorns per capita, and also we're receiving the highest amount of venture capital invested into kind of like local startups per capita. So the plan is to, of course, keep that lead and extend it. So big focus on talent.
But of course, to bring such a innovative project to the reality, you need innovative approach.
Of course.
That's what you have in Finland. Great. Frank.
Yeah, thank you, Sylwia, for having us here today. I'm basically grown up in the logistics industry, more than 20 years in the railway industry. And from that perspective, I was working in Poland for 5 years. I was living in the Netherlands. I'm now living in the Netherlands for almost 13 years. And having that perspective and having met Kustaa and Peter earlier, we thought it may make very much sense to see a connectivity topic here into the region. And using all modes of transport, sea freight, air freight, rail, road, and see what we can do here. And that is also what I'm busy with, advising customers.
Okay, so I would say that it's good to maybe start our discussion from how do you actually see the potential of Poland and CEE in terms of the development? Yeah, because of course there are a lot of discussions about Poland being at the heart of Europe, but also in terms of the potential being a European logistics hub. I think that recent, of course, geopolitical events create kind of an opportunity because the heart of the Europe will be maybe extended even more with the Ukraine coming in the due course to the European Union. So let's start maybe, Frank, with your Western perspective of the Poland. Yes, are we too humble or?
Poland is too humble from a historic perspective seen, and this is also what we discussed with many people before, also with Peter and Kustaa during this stay here. What we will see right now and what we're seeing already is that the center of gravity is definitely changing. Yeah, there are more and more companies considering where to set up shop. I mean, we're in the geopolitical situation that right now we see the US, EU, but also then obviously Asia, China, splitting up more and more. And the question is, what is going to happen with Europe, right? And many companies are also looking at their value chains and say, well, is that really what we should do in the future? Shouldn't we be closer to the customer with our production? And I think here we see definitely a trend that business leaders decide for countries like Poland, for the CEE region, to just be closer to 480 million consumers. And this is one of the reasons why Poland should sort of lose its humbleness, but be rather, raise its voice and say, we can do better, we can do more. And projects are plenty. We will discuss that later.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what's your take on Poland and the CEE region, and why are you looking for some opportunities for cooperation here?
Yeah, I mean, of course, geography is what it is, and Poland is, really at the heart of Europe, and especially kind of like the new Europe. So once we get this kind of like war, won, and Russia out of the way, I think that it will be very, very interesting, and kind of like the new Europe will, put Poland in an even more interesting position.
Mm-hmm. And how do you define New Europe?
Yeah, I mean, basically, then we have Ukraine on our side as well, and then we get kind of like Russia out of the way, so then things will get a lot more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Polish position in the logistics chains is very crucial, and kind of looking from the Finnish or the Nordic perspective, it is Central Europe access to us. Of course, we offer the Arctic access then now on the other hand. So it's not only about how we access Central European markets, but it's kind of how Central Europe accesses the Nordic markets as well.
Okay, maybe it's a good moment also maybe to extend a little bit more the project that you are running. I think that we first met a few years ago in Poland on the other conference when you were actually launching the plans of doing the tunnel. And I think that actually current situation has redefined a little bit the position and the meaning, strategic meaning of this project. So can you tell us more about the project? Because, what it is, what was the aim, and maybe now because of the circumstances we are facing, what role it can bring now?
Yeah, so we have continued running the project, so doing designing and running the environmental impact assessment, so the EIA. In Finland, we are pretty far with that. In Estonia, still waiting for things to happen. Estonian government has been a bit slow, but.
So maybe let's bring also the explanation about the tunnel itself. So maybe one step back. Okay?
So 103 kilometers long tunnel, two tunnel pipes, one for cargo, one for passenger traffic, two tracks in each tunnel, 4 stations, and cargo terminal at each end connecting in Tallinn with the Rail Baltic that is currently being constructed. The gauge will be the Euro gauge, so that's good news for operators, of course, able to access the Finnish markets smoother. And that's kind of the basics.
And now the project, because of the geopolitical situation, is it like engages? Because I know that at the beginning it was your actually private project. I mean,
yeah, it's a private project, and I mean now, of course, now that we're joining NATO, so it's NATO compatible tunnel. So not only can we move, people and various products through the tunnel, but also it's important for military mobility as well. So as the war in the Ukraine has shown us that it's still important to have the ability to move a large number of heavy equipment and people around fast. So I think that's one thing that has changed, and everyone now realizes that it's super important. I mean, if you look at geography, Finland is an island, now more than ever because of Russia. So we have a long border with those guys, and the only route for us to Europe is through the Baltic states and Poland. So I think that is something that again makes it more interesting. And I think also then going from here to all the way to the Arctic. So I think that is also like an interesting route going forward. So I think that the tunnel is more important than ever. But also kind of like all of that said, the main business case for us with the tunnel is the reduced travel time. So we're reducing travel time from going from Helsinki to Tallinn. It's now 2 hours, a bit over 2 hours with ferry, and we're reducing it to 20 minutes. So it's really like a metro connection, making Helsinki and Tallinn one unified metropolitan area with a bit over 2 million people, and soon to be 3. So it's becoming major epicenter of innovation and entrepreneurship and all of that. And as I mentioned before, it's already the leading region globally when it comes to a number of things, and we intend to keep it that way.
And does it mean also, because of the things you mentioned, that the Finnish government is more engaged in your project? Because it was not, as far as I remember, initially planned.
The Finnish government, basically governments come and go. So we have had 3 governments in Finland, and I guess 3 also on the Estonian side during the project. So again, I think that the government, let's say, engagement depends a little bit on who's in power, and we have elections coming up in April in Finland, so we will see how it goes. But I would say that all the political parties are very positive, and especially now that we've had the pandemic, so that already made the point that again, Finland is an island, we need to do something, and now the war really drives that point home. So I think that now everybody understands that it's super important. And also Estonia had elections actually like last week, and winning parties are all very supportive of the tunnel project, and not just the tunnel but the whole like finest Bay Area development. So I think that we have very much like a shared vision of where our part of the world is going and needs to go. So I think that things are looking very good, and I think that we can move things, pretty fast.
And maybe to add to that, yes, it's a private project, but of course we do collaborate with the government. They set the laws and the regulation, and we need to comply to that. So it's quite clear that we follow what they set.
Yeah, but then you have different also approaches in terms of financing, right? Because that's also that, for example, we'll talk about CPK in a moment in terms of strategic infrastructure from the country, which here is like driven by the government, and in your case is a little bit different. So I'm wondering also from the financial perspective, what's the vision of the development of the project?
Yeah, so I mean basically completely private project, and because of that we can move things faster. But as Kustaa said, we need to of course have a close partnership, close collaboration with not only like Finnish but also Estonian government, and I think that also our interest is that it's also connected to kind of like the European infrastructure, so that is something that's very important. And then you get into that it's not only about that having like European standard rail, but and all that, but we also need to have the signaling, we need to have all the control systems, all of that, so that it's interoperable. And I think that it's very important for us that the EU is, let's say, pushing the member states to do the right thing. So, when we look at like Rail Baltic, that we build that with high enough ambition. And right now, if you look at that, it's a great example of what can happen when you have, government projects, EU projects, and when you have not one but actually three governments. Or Baltic states and Poland and Finland, we're like at the end of like Rail Baltic, and I think that because of that it's been a bit difficult for the different countries to agree on the priorities and also I would say ambition level. I mean it's kind of like sad to see that we are building something that will be slower than what's been in place, say in Japan since like 1960s. And this is not the right way for Europe to stay competitive in this kind of like global competition. I mean, if China, Japan, everybody else is building better, faster than we are, how can we expect to be competitive? So I think that this is something that we need to make sure that the national governments understand, the EU understands, and we need to be a bit more ambitious, I think, in general. I mean, so it's not only that Poland is modest, I think all of Europe and all of EU is a bit too modest in our ambitions when it comes to connectivity.
But maybe it's not also acting as a one in this race, right?
Yep.
We'll talk about it in a moment a little bit more, but Frank, now let's switch to another, because on one hand we have a really ambitious project of the tunnel. On the other hand, we have something that is coming up in Poland, which is CPK. So what's your take out on, those two projects? Rail Baltica, which is also an important link between the Nordics and Baltic states and Poland.
I mean, it fits, in my view, very well. I mean, the CPK, the Central Transportation Hub, is an important project to not only enhance the capabilities of air freight, but to make it a multimodal logistics hub. And connected with that comes a lot of railway infrastructure investment, if it then all goes through. I mean, potentially we're talking about up to 1,600 kilometers of new railway lines which will be constructed. That linking into Rail Baltica with a higher ambition than we have right now, and then obviously linking into Finland via a tunnel to make it really a seamless means of transport. Because right now, 2 hours of ferry for passengers means also minimum, I would say, 8, 10, 12 hours for cargo, because you have to shift from rail or road to a ferry and then again going to Finland, and then you have to switch again, which Peter described rightfully so as an island. That makes it ineffective, and that is something which in the new world, in the new setup, I think is very important to also be attractive, not only for producers, for manufacturing companies, but in total people to make it an attractive region to live, and also to be present in that market. I mean, let's face it, we are 480 million people, 480 million consumers, and there is a lot we can do ourselves to improve the situation. Yeah, and we're not only talking about railway lines, we're talking about communication, we're talking IT, we're talking cybersecurity, we're talking critical infrastructure. All this, what we see right now, is coming under the spotlight due to the conflict we see in Ukraine, and there I think we also see the impact right now, how important how important these projects are for the future, also from a military perspective. I mean, we mentioned before, without Rzeszów in the southeast of Poland, for being able to accommodate all these military cargo actions and transportation chains, now we see with CPK that there's also something to be added. And, linking that into Finland, I mean, the eastern border of Europe will be in the spotlight for the future. That is definitely sure.
Yeah, and it's not only the military, but it's something called supply security that from Finnish perspective has always been very important. So how do we make sure that we have enough reserves of different supplies at each moment? And
I mean,
as an island, yes.
Supply chain resilience is, I think, one of these key words. And let's also face it, we are living in a multipolar world. It was bipolar, now it's multipolar, but we're also living in a poly crisis. We had COVID, we had the supply chain disruptions. The war started in Ukraine. Then we had energy difficulties. I mean, everything comes together, and we have to manage that. And then in this context, we have to see together what we can do for a region like CEE and how connect this region into the rest of Europe, right? And how to perform actually infrastructure projects in a much faster, much more ambitious way in order to be really on top of what the future will bring us.
And are there any benchmark projects in Europe or elsewhere around the world that could actually put some arguments in the discussion about how quickly we can expect such a projects to come into life, or maybe what's their boost? How do they boost the local?
Well, one great example that we have been following was this Olympic line for the Winter Olympics in Beijing that was created. So Beijing, Changjiakou, 174 kilometers, fully automated fast rail. And that was very impressive, and of course the driver was the Olympics.
And same thing actually in Tokyo. So I mean they also upgraded the fast rail there to like maglev for the Tokyo Olympics. So I think both Beijing and Tokyo Olympics were like good triggers for then China and Japan to do stuff. And I think that again we need to be faster at constructing infrastructure. Of course, we all understand that it's a different model if you look at China and a bit of a different like political system and all of that. But we can't always use an excuse that you have to understand that like in a democracy nothing happens fast. True, but it can't be that we have to like look at then 10 years for planning and another 10 years for like getting stuff done, and then these constant like delays. If you look at like Rail Baltic, it's been now pushed back I think to 2030 or something like that. It was supposed to be done 2026, and like then you have constant like delays, and then you overrun like on cost and all of this. So I think that we just need to be better, and we need to get better at doing this, and again this is both like national regulation, EU, everything, and I think all of us as kind of like Europeans and citizens of our respective like nations, we need to demand more and not accept that you have to understand that this takes some time. I mean, no, we don't have to understand, and we can do things much better, much faster. So I think we are too good at coming up with like excuses for like not doing things. So this is something that is not like acceptable anymore.
I think to add to that is, for example, what you see in Poland, and having lived in Poland ending the 90s, beginning the 2000s, there is a catch-up effect here in terms of, look at the logistics industry, how many warehouses have been constructed. I mean, this is unbelievable. Where you see in the Western European countries, that the citizens start to have this NIMBY phenomenon, which you see everywhere, not in my backyard. Yeah, so they don't want these big shoe boxes anymore, whilst when you drive through Poland, you're every time astonished that there is a new warehouse, 800 meters long, 100 meters deep, and 20 meters high, being constructed, and you just ask yourself, how long will that go on? And is there not eventually now the opportunity to also think about it, how Poland should do it for the next 20, 30 years, not in order to create this effect that the inhabitants afterwards will say, but we don't want all this truck traffic, road traffic, simply because it's polluting, it's a nuisance, right? And the infrastructure will eventually not grow that fast anymore. But becoming a production hub and a logistics hub, well, then you have to cope with these things. And I think this is one of the challenges where, especially this region, can learn so much from each other. I mean, from Finland, from the Baltics into Poland and the CEE region, that there is so much to anticipate for the future 20, 30 years to make it also a livable country, not to plaster everything full with warehouses and then afterwards asking yourself, and well, it looks partly ugly. Eventually, it's not up to the standards when it comes to environmental future demands, simply because of climate change. And there are things which I believe Poland and the other countries.
Of course, the new stock is a little bit, following, but it's not everything is a new stock, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and therefore, I mean, you see that there is a huge potential, and that Poland hasn't lost really in attractiveness for logistics, because a lot of e-commerce activities are provided out of Poland into Western Europe, but that also needs to get the acceptance from the inhabitants, from the people living there, and making it then also a future-proof, resilient concept. Yeah.
But it's also true that when you were talking about this, gravity center, now everything is focused mainly on the western border, right? And now, of course, because of what we are talking about, there is still a huge potential on the east border. I mean, we are mentioning directions. We have also Via Carpathia, which also will, I think, release the potential of the east, especially in the due course with the connection to Ukraine.
And because you just mentioned Ukraine, I mean, there is so much cargo now coming from the Black Sea ports, which are sort of not accessible as they were before. A lot of cargo is now moving towards Poland, also Hungary, Romania, but the main share is going to Poland, and how to cope with it. I mean, you cannot do everything by truck. You have to use rail, which implicates again that the CPK, together with the infrastructure adhering to it, will connect into the ports, the Polish ports. Yeah, because Poland is in the lucky situation not to be a landlocked country. And even more lucky that it's not an island, right? I mean, Poland can evade into basically all kind of directions, but the point here is how to make this a future-proof concept. And there will be a lot of changes to be seen when it comes to cargo flows. Yeah, because the sheer mass of the Ukrainian cargo going out for the moment. Peter mentioned the war will be over at a certain moment in time. Well, then the cargo moves in. Yeah, if you do not have the logistics infrastructure for that, how are you going to handle that? Because you cannot wait for 50 years, right? You want to move faster. So do you have the right railway lines? Do you have the right infrastructure? All these kind of things have to come into play.
And then you still get the ever given moment, Suez Canal blocked suddenly, and you need to figure out how to cope with that.
Yes.
Okay, so my last question would be actually around this, strengthening of Europe and how the projects that we are discussing currently should actually be treated as the European infrastructure and not really regional projects. So I'm wondering, what is your take out on that?
We spoke, it's about the free movement of people and goods, but for us the tunnel project is it's an innovation platform. So we're enabling a lot of things to happen using this mega project as a platform. And one example is a Slovakian company that we have been working with on plasma drilling technology that they have patented, and it will help us to do the boring of the tunnel much faster. And great example of how we can promote local European technologies and kind of grow together also.
I think what we have seen recently, and there's one example about companies from Poland and Spain cooperating right now on an intermodal connection. So a producer of furniture is basically driving the goods, the cargo to Spain, and a producer of fashion is basically filling the train backwards to Poland. They promote it now as the longest intermodal connection in Europe, 2,000 kilometers. Let's add another 1,500 kilometers to Finland, and I think then we're there. 3.5 3,500
We still
kilometers.
have the 1,100 to the Norwegian coast.
True. Let's stay step by step, but that we have this one. But imagining that you can do 3,500 kilometers in one go, that is something which eventually should be taken as an example how Europe can develop and should develop in order to make sure that the regions are interconnected, and that we are sort of not sitting in the southwest or in the northeast, but that this is a unified Europe where rail infrastructure, especially as the future mode of transport because of climate change, of all the effects which we're going to see, or we would have to expect, that we can use a strong mode of transport to make that happen. Not only for cargo but also for passengers, because we will see also that air traffic will sort of get its challenges and therefore question how to have a resilient and strong infrastructure in the future.
Definitely we can say that the infrastructure is like a blood system. So if we want to have Europe as a whole, we need to have a blood system that can, transfer the nutritions all around and not in some parts, right?
Totally.
Very good.
Well so I think that would be a good one-liner for the end. But I would add another one, that to make, a good and sustainable projects and future-proof projects, we need the right people at the table. So thank you very much for the discussion and hope that those discussions will drive the projects forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylwia, for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.